Well, thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be here. It reminds me of a story I told this morning. As many of you know, I'm a recovering alcoholic, and it's an interesting thing about being a recovering alcoholic because God gives us the gift before we do the work. And I know some people say you do the work and then you get the gift. Well, sometimes we can't get the gift until we get God. And for our own practical purposes, what happened on December 24th, 1982, I woke up, and if you had asked me December 25th, if you asked me December 24th how I was doing, I would have said I'm really doing well. Because sometimes it's hard to look at oneself. It's another gift we get. I'm going to talk about is the ability to not only look at ourselves objectively, but we get to surround ourselves with people that will also help us look at ourselves objectively. So that day, December 25th, I came down the stairs of my house alone, and here's a guy who thought he had it all, and all of a sudden I had that gift I got, which was a clear objective viewpoint of myself, and I said I'm in trouble. I opened up a book that I didn't understand, couldn't understand, didn't get it, and all of a sudden I opened a book, and it's amazing when you open a book sometimes how they rewrite it since the last time you look at it, how they change the words that used to be in it, and I've been really fortunate, because since that time I've been able to do all sorts of things I never thought I could accomplish, but I never did all alone, because you always do it with the belief, a higher power, or God. And Pastor Taylor was right. I was at this conference, and they asked people, what do you do in the morning? And these people, said, first person said I work out, second person said I work out, third person said I work out. I think they looked at me and knew that wasn't going to be it. So I said, well, I pray. And then they sort of look at you, yeah, come on. So I said the prayers. I said, I ask God every morning to remove my bondage of myself, take away life's difficulties, so victory or there may be a witness to thy and other people thy way of life. Amen. And then I say, God, take all of me. Take all of me. Take all my character defects. Please remove them so I can be useful to other people, which I think sort of showed them that I really do it. And when I got done, as Pastor said, the rest of the three people said, we pray too. We pray too. So it's sort of interesting, and I was thinking today about messaging, and one of the messages is sometimes you think something's an obstacle and it becomes an opportunity. Sometimes you think the worst thing in your life turns out to be the best thing in your life. Wake up that day and I think my life is over, I have nothing to live for. I actually went to a minister. And I told him I was suicidal. And I asked him about life, and he asked on a 1 through 10, where are you? And I said, I'm a 1. Because I really, really wanted this lady back too. And he said, where do you think she is? And I said, I don't know, I think maybe a 6. And he said, well, a 6 ain't going to be attracted to a 1. He said, you got to get yourself up there. And he told me some things to do to get healthy one day at a time. And about 90 days later, I went back to him. And I said, what did you do that day? What made a difference? He said, I just wanted you to walk forward. I couldn't get your girl back. I couldn't give you what you wanted. But I need you to have hope enough to take that step forward. And ironically, later on, that really wasn't what I was looking for all the time. God gives us really what we need sometimes, not what we want. So this thing I thought was the worst thing in the world ended up being the greatest blessing that I've ever had in my life. So obstacles become opportunities. And the other thing you get, and I got to read this to you, is sometimes the ability to pause. When people ask me or people say, well, what should I do? The best answer you can always say is, well, pray. Because that really allows us to think, but also allows us to pause. And sometimes we even help other people pause. So sometimes people react, and we all react. I react, and then I wish I didn't react. But and I'll talk about that. But here's a text message I got today. And because I'm still very involved in healthcare, I'm sort of like a triage person for people. They'll text me when they call me. I got a call from a person in Boston Tuesday morning at 7 a.m. saying that their brother-in-law was in this hospital and the care wasn't good. Do I know anybody? To show you how God works, I'm sitting in the restaurant I go to the restaurant because Studer Group's having a conference there. I turn to the lady next to me and I say, do we know anybody at Brigham Women's Children's Hospital in Boston? She said, yeah, one of your employees works there. I said, oh, that's good. Yeah, one of your physician coaches works there. So I got the number, I called him, and that made a difference. So here's a little different one today. This is a person in Pensacola whose father's in a nursing facility. This is her text message to me. My dad was attacked by a patient last night and almost broke his arm. I think we should call the police. What would you suggest? I wrote, what has the facility done since this has happened? My mom and brother are there now. That's how they found out. But by my dad, not the facility, I believe. Find out how the facility plans on handling it. This will outline the next steps. Let's see what they planned first. Remember, it started off with calling the police because some guy broke into her father's room and tried to break his arm. I'm asking them now. Just talked with my dad. The other man entered his room in the middle of the night while Daddy was in a chair sleeping. Daddy stood up and backed the guy out of the room and ended up in the hall for 2 minutes before the nurse arrived. No punishment to the intruder. Just told Dad to keep his door locked. That's it. I'm sick about it. Surprised Dad was that strong. Last message of the day. Turns out it was an old woman trying to get some of my good-looking dad. Mom has now signed the paperwork to keep him there. And no, we will not sue. Oh, well. Isn't that how it works out sometimes when we pause? We're so grateful we didn't do anything. Today was an interesting day. Sometimes there's blogs about me or things happen. I was telling Pastor in the room, I said, you got to be careful sometimes what you pray for. I said, I was living in Chicago, and I asked God, I said, God, please give me more patience and tolerance. And he moved me to Pensacola, Florida. It gave me all sorts of opportunities to gain patience and tolerance. So today there was some blog anonymous stuff, and you get resentful. And thank God the program that I'm involved in teaches me that not to be resentful, because resentment is taking a poison pill and hoping the other person dies. So how God works, I normally don't write notes, but I want to take notes tonight. I talked to Pastor about the message, and one of the things that came up was I needed a piece of paper. So I went to my bedside, and here I am sort of upset with these people, and I pulled out a piece of paper, and it was from the Hyatt Regency that I must have stayed at somewhere. I looked, and something was written on it, and it says, be kind. Everyone you meet is fighting a battle you may not know about. What a great message I needed to hear today. So let me walk through. I was speaking to the Studer group, and as you know, this was I'm the end of March, and you have to make a decision, and they sort of use the term bleeding deacon. You don't want to stay around too long where you suffocate an organization, but you also don't want to leave too early. So I said to the group of 270 employees, I don't want to be bleeding deacon. Some of you will think I'm leaving too soon. Some of you will think I'm leaving too late. But you don't want to stick around longer than you do. But also we have different callings in life. We have different callings, different messages. And I've had a tremendous calling over these years to do more in Pensacola, because I think there's some things that maybe we could have got done we didn't get done. Maybe that Y could be on Parcel 8. Maybe that Center for Entrepreneurship would be there. Maybe we'd have better kindergarten readiness. Not that I could do it alone, but I kept saying, maybe if I could have or would have and should have, but I felt a tremendous calling to give my life back to the community. And that's the thing I've learned about a gift from God. I think I got a tremendous gift from God with my sobriety. Now, how do you keep your sobriety? By giving it to other people, by helping other people. And you have to give it away to keep it. And that's the amazing thing about a gift. You get a gift, but the only way you can keep it is to give that gift away. And that's the magic of what we're talking about. So it's an interesting life for me. It's an interesting time for me, and I'm just thrilled to be here. I'm a little overwhelmed. First time I ever talked at a meeting of alcoholics, I was a nervous wreck, and I asked somebody, I hope I give the right message, and he said, ask God to help you with the message, because God will give you the message that people need to hear, and that's what I'm hoping for tonight. So I was asked this week by a bunch of people that work for Studer Group, what are the top 5 things you would tell us as coaches we need to do? We have these people called coaches, and they go into organizations and try to help people maximize their life. When I wrote the mission statement of Studer Group, it was to make healthcare better for patients, physicians, and employees. But most importantly, it's the vision statement I live by. The vision statement says the goal is to maximize someone's human potential and help them maximize other humans' potential. I don't think that's a company vision. I think it's a life vision that we can all have and that you all have in this room. So I was asked, out of the cuff, like, what are the 5 things? So I'm going to give you the 5 things that I gave to the people that work for Studer Group this last week. And the first one was the ability to objectively evaluate our own self. And that's the real magic when we go into an organization. I go, sometimes you use metrics to show it. I know my doctor used metrics. It's called a scale. It's called blood pressure. She doesn't say, I think you're a little heavy. She says, you need to lose that tummy, and here's why, for your height. So I think sometimes, though, it's hard to objectively measure ourselves. So sometimes we need people around us to help us measure ourselves, whether it's a prayer group, whether it's a minister, whether it's a wife. My wife will sometimes say to me, you're being caustic right now. Because if you care about somebody, you sort of help them measure themselves. So I said the first thing you have to do is, first of all, objectively measure yourself. That day that I woke up and God told me that I was going in the wrong direction, it wasn't me that told me I was going in the wrong direction. It was a moment of clarity. And where did that come from? It wasn't that I had lived a good life. It wasn't I had done the good things. I think I had lived the opposite of what God would have wanted. But God saw something I didn't even see in me, and he gave me a moment of clarity. But then I have to take some steps, and I have to walk a certain way in order to keep that. Number 2 is be teachable. That's the other thing that I think is just crucial. Be teachable. One of the things I said to the group the other day was, the goal should not be to be the smartest person in the room. The goal should be the best student in the room. And there's a whole difference between being the smartest person and being the best student. The other thing I found is to be comfortable with some things that are uncomfortable. We have a saying that it's what you permit, you promote. And I think sometimes in our life and even in our community, we're silent. I'll have people come up to me sometimes and say, I was at a restaurant and heard these things, say some things about you, and I knew they were wrong, and I'd say, what'd you say? And they said, I didn't want to cause a scene. But Pastor Taylor's not afraid to be uncomfortable. He told me the story about somebody complaining about my office building, and he said, I got a better idea. Why don't we go to the city council and ask them to tear down the stadium, tear down the office building, bring the toxic waste pier and the homeless back? How would you like that? And they didn't answer you, did they? What we permit, we promote. And sometimes what happens is if we permit something that is not right, we promote it. Silence is supporting it. My brother-in-law about 7 years ago became quite the hero in the city of Chicago where he lives. There was a gentleman beating up a woman on the streets of Chicago, and people were watching. Why? They were scared. Maybe it's none of my business. Maybe if I do that, he'll hit me. And my brother-in-law jumped in and stopped it. And they wrote a whole story about him. But see, there shouldn't be stories about it because it shouldn't be unusual. So I think that whole idea is if we're not careful, we have to be careful what we permit, we promote. Which ties also to be courageous enough to let people know what's going on in their life, and we call it spinach in your teeth. Beth Keene worked for Studer Group. Beth Keene passed away about 4 years ago. One of my books is dedicated to Beth Keene. In fact, I got a wonderful letter from her husband, Tom, this holiday season, telling us, because we planted a tree at our office building for Beth Keene. One of our rooms is named after Beth Keene, and he tells us how much he misses his wife, Beth Keene. Well, Beth Keene has a videotape, and I played it yesterday. You see, even though you're not alive, you still carry a message. Even though you're not present, you still create a legacy. Certainly that's what God did. That's what Jesus does. That's what the disciples do. So let me tell you a little about Beth Keene's video. Beth Keene was speaking in the VA hospital in Wisconsin. And Beth Keene was speaking, and she's a good speaker, and she was speaking, and all of a sudden the president of the VA came up to her and said, out in the hallway right now. And of course, when you're ever a speaker, if I was speaking now and pastor came up to me and said, we got to get out of here right now, I'm thinking, what did I say? This is not a good situation. What happened? And so, of course, she's a nervous wreck because these people are speaking, and this wasn't the normal break. And he pulls her out in the hallway, and he said she could tell he was very, very nervous about this. And he finally said to her, I don't know if you know this, because she had a sweater on and like pants. And he said, but while you've been speaking, your sweater has been sliding up your stomach. and your belly is hanging out. I don't know if you're aware of this. And of course, she's thinking, oh my God, her stomach is sticking out. And he said, I just wanted to let you know that. And of course, she thanked him immensely for doing that, came back in and said to everybody what a kind CEO they had. The reason he pulled her out in the hallway is to let her know about that, and it took a lot of courage to do that. Now, the other thing I will tell you about Beth is she knew they were taping her, just like you were taping me. He said before she got back up on the stage to speak, she did stop by the cameraman and say, have you been taping this? And he said, honey, all I was trying to do was keep it above the shoulders. The message is, if we care about somebody, we'll tell them that they have spinach in their teeth. I'm a sloppy guy. I don't know about you, but I brush my teeth and I get toothpaste all over and I'm in a hurry. And if my wife sees me before I leave, she normally will say, you got toothpaste on you. If I run into people that see me and it's a collar or something, but mainly they'll do that. I've spoken to groups. I was speaking at Vanderbilt Medical Center one time, and it was huge at Belmont School. They had the whole gymnasium, and I get done, and Dr. Gabby comes up to me, and I'm a little nervous. And this, you always hear these stories. This is absolutely, comes up to me, and I'm thinking he's going to tell me what a good job he's doing. And this was a break, and he said, I just want you to know your zipper was open. And all I did was start turning to see, could they see anything like that? But you say things to people that you care about. And that's one of the other things I think we have to learn to be, is not be defensive. People aren't trying to hurt us, they're trying to help us. So we have to ask God sometimes not to be defensive. The fourth message I gave to him is to have empathy. This stuff is difficult. Life is difficult. Scott Peck said in his book, A Road Less Traveled, life is difficult. Once we realize it's difficult, it's not as difficult. Sometimes we can make something look easy. Bubba Watson was in town today. In fact, Bubba Watson gives you the best. And he was actually trying to arrange his flight so he could come tonight, but he had to get to Phoenix. But when you watch Bubba golf, it makes it look so easy. So if you golfed with him, you just think you're worthless. Until Bubba says, this is pretty hard. I've practiced a long, long time with this. And I find when we look at leadership, when we look at marriage, when we look at raising kids, it's a difficult thing. It's really, really hard. And of course, we also learn, when we think it's easy, it really isn't, is it? I remember saying to this family one time, two of our children, and Mallory was 2 years old and was sleeping through the night. I don't know if anybody's ever done this, but these people said their child didn't sleep through the night yet. So I said, we're lucky. Mallory sleeps through the night. That was the last night Mallory ever slept through the night. So I think if we don't deflate our ego gets deflated for us. And it's a lot better for us to deflate our own ego. So I think it's all about empathy. And probably the last gift is to constantly give it away. And that's what this thing is all about. And don't underestimate the difference that one makes in people's lives. And that's one of the things I talk about quite often. And I'll sort of come to the wrap up with that. Sometimes we don't think we make a difference. We truly make a difference. We don't even realize it. Sometimes we're not mature enough to let people know they make a difference. My third grade teacher made a huge impact on my life. I have a speech impediment. I have hearing impaired, I only hear in one ear. By the way, that's also a good thing. I can't hear well, but I listen extremely good. Because you only got one ear, you got to pay such careful attention. I have a speech impediment, so I was in speech pathology for a long time. Who would have thought that leadership was about doing things you're uncomfortable with? Doing things that are hard until they get comfortable. So here this thing I thought was bad ended up being an opportunity. In third grade, I couldn't read. They passed me only on trial because my mother lobbied, and I ran into a lady named Mrs. James. And Mrs. James changed my life because she taught me how to read. But as Mrs. James did something else, she let me know she cared about me. And what I've learned, it all starts with letting people know that you care about them. Now, how did Mrs. James let me know she cared about me? I don't know if she had a master's. I don't know if she had special training. But I'll tell you one thing she did. She knew that I love sports. So instead of me making me read the stuff you had to read, she brought in the Chicago Tribune sports page. Because she knew if I was passionate about something, I'd work hard enough. Heck, I not only got to be good in reading, I got really good in math, from batting averages and ERAs and so on. She also put me in a school play. People that want other people to be successful position them for success, not failure. I asked some Major League ball players one time who's the greatest manager they think in Major League Baseball, and Bobby Cox's name came out all the time. He said, Bobby Cox, when you're playing for him, you may not like him, what he's doing, but then you realize the reason you're only playing against lefties is that's all you can hit. And he prolongs your career by building up for success. I was in a school play. When you have a speech impediment, you're in a school play, you're usually a tree or a rock or something else. And she gave me a part, and the part says I'm as poor as ever. And I still remember in third grade exactly where my mother sat. Because when you have a child with special needs, you're always concerned what's going to happen, who's going to take care of them, are they going to be okay? And all of a sudden, my mother saw me being successful because Mrs. James set me up. In sixth grade, I went and Mr. Fry, and I knew Mr. Fry liked me also. I was barely in there a day, and Mr. Fry took my desk and slid it right next to his. We co-taught the entire sixth grade. In fact, I'm pretty excited. I've got a lot of grandchildren, 6 grandsons, and Owen's in kindergarten. You can get a 1 through 4. In first quarter, he got all 1s. 4's the highest. And I said to his mother, this kid's consistent. You know what? It takes 3 positives to every 1 negative to somebody to feel good about another human being. The other gift you get is to look at things in an optimistic way, not a pessimistic way. Research shows when you give 3 messages to one, somebody feels better about another human being. In the United States of America, and Gallup did a study of 42 countries, and they found out in 41 countries when the report card comes, the other 41 countries, the parents start out with the positive. There was only 1 country where the parents went to the negative, and that was the United States of America. I went to therapy when I was in my 30s because even though I just couldn't shake this feeling of being worthless. And the therapist looked at me one day and she said, Quint, when I give you a compliment, you deflect it. When I tell you something, I give you a compliment, you deflect it. When I tell you something negative, you push it away. The reason you don't feel good about you is you filter out what's right. Sometimes I think if we're not careful, we can filter out what's right in our life, in our family, in our community by focusing on what's wrong. 6th grade, Mr. Fry knew I needed extra help, so instead of embarrassing me, he slid me next to his desk so he could help me without the other kids seeing it. He always kept me busy, and he always looked at what's right. My mother came to see him for parent-teacher conferences, and I always acted like I was sleeping when she came home because it wasn't going to be good. And she came into my room and was so excited because she heard a good report. Mr. Fry said, I like having your boy in class. He's a bundle of energy. In 4th and 5th grade, they said he's hyperactive, he's disruptive, and doesn't sit still. He says he's a bundle of energy. We just need to align it in the right direction. That was Mr. Fry. In high school, I got a guy named Coach King. Coach King was the high school soccer coach, freshman, sophomore soccer coach. And I went out for soccer because I wanted to be an athlete, but I was small and slow. Well, cross country won't work and football won't work. They started a new sport in 1965 in Chicago called soccer, and they said, I heard they didn't cut anybody because it was the first year, because I had a tremendous fear of failure, a fear of letting people down, a tremendous fear of being embarrassed. So I went out for soccer and trying to do my best, and I'm going, here I go, and I miss the ball. It goes right by me. And Coach King says, good job. Way to hustle. Way to get over there. Next time, put your foot out. See, what Coach King did is he realized the positive. Sometimes people quit going for the ball because we tell them they missed the ball instead of they hustled to try for it. I can tell you, I can watch a kid in high school or grade school and tell you who's had a good coach and a bad coach. Because what happens is when you tell people something good, they keep going for it. If you just tell them what it's wrong. Watch baseball all the time. You have a great baseball player, he's 8 years old, 9 years old. When he goes up, the coach says, you're up there to hit, you're up there to hit, because he wants him to hit. If you're not a great baseball player, the coach says something else. He says, make sure they throw you a strike. That means you'll probably take the first pitch. First pitch comes in a ball, then he gives you the second message. You're ahead of them. Make sure they throw you a strike. It's another ball, it's 2-0. Now it gets even more aggressive. You're way ahead of them. It's got to be right down the middle. It's another ball. Then the coach gives you the take sign. Don't swing no matter what. The ball comes through, it's a strike. It's 3-1. The manager, the third base coach says, you're still ahead of him. You're still ahead of him. Go ahead. It's got to be right down there. Well, of course, that means don't swing. Now it's strike 2, and it's 3-2. Next pitch comes over, and the ball goes over. The batter doesn't swing. He strikes out, and he says, you're supposed to be up there hitting. You just programmed me 5 straight pitches not to swing. Sometimes we get programmed, and we program ourselves, and we don't even realize it. So my junior year, I play soccer my sophomore and freshman year, and my junior year, I get cut. I'm struggling in school, and now the only thing that kept me going was soccer, and I got cut. All of a sudden, my senior year, 2 weeks, right, the soccer practice started before school. Lee Benesack calls me. Lee Benesack calls me and says, Quint, Coach King wants to know why you're not out for soccer. I said, Coach King's the freshman, sophomore coach. He said, didn't you hear? He's the new varsity coach. He told me to ask you to come out. That phone call changed my life. Years ago, I was early on, and I was going to a meeting with alcoholics, and I didn't feel comfortable. I walked into a room. There was a guy I don't even know. He looked at me. He went like this and pointed down to his chair, and I felt loved. He had no idea the impact he made on my life, and Coach King made an impact by telling me to come out for soccer. Went out for soccer, and I got my letter, and he did something else. He had me come into his classroom and be his teacher's assistant and work with his students. When I ended up going to college, they asked me what I wanted to be. I said, I want to be just like Coach King. I want to teach and I want to coach. They said, what do you want to teach? And I said, I want to teach special education, because Coach King was a special education teacher. You never know the difference people make in people's lives. Years ago, I was speaking in the Grove, and sometimes they'll say, make sure you tell a story, make sure you tell a certain story. And they said, make sure you tell Coach King's story tonight. When I told Coach King's story, when I got done, Coach King walked up on the stage. They had found Coach King for me. But I never got to thank Mrs. James and Mr. Fry. So the message is, sometimes we make a difference in people's lives, but we might never hear about it. But don't underestimate the difference you make in people's lives. So as I close out, let me tell you a little story, and I'll call it the wedding story. My first daughter, she was actually here this week, got married in 1999. She got married June 13th. Now, if you've ever been father of the bride, I found out there's a number of rules to be. How many of you have ever been father of the bride? You know the rules then, right? 1, shell out. The 3 S's. Number 2, shut up. And if you shell out and shut up, then you get to show up. So my daughter's getting married. She's getting married July 13th. And, I've been sort of told to stay out of it. And so I do. She's getting married because they stayed in Wisconsin. We moved down here. She was out of high school, St. Mary's Catholic Church in Janesville, Wisconsin. My wife went up there early, and I went up there on that Friday because they were having a rehearsal. Now I walk into the St. Mary's Catholic Church, and I'm a little surprised because the wedding is supposed to be, she wanted an outdoor wedding. She wanted an outdoor wedding, and we found it along the Rock River in Wisconsin, and it was going to be in a park. She wanted a park, June bride, and she wanted a gazebo. I felt bad for her because I didn't think she'd have a gazebo. Well, there's no reason to feel bad for her. If you want something at a wedding, you can get something at a wedding. So she ended up having a gazebo, and I'm wondering why we're doing the rehearsal dinner inside when the wedding's outside, but I've been told to shut up. So I'm at the St. Mary's Catholic Church, and she's on my side, and she must have felt this. You're lucky as a Baptist you don't have guilt and shame. But anyway, she must have been feeling guilty about this, so she says to me, Dad, I got to tell you something. Tonight we're getting married because they won't marry me outside unless I get married inside. But no one should know it because I don't want to ruin the wedding for them. But tonight I'm really getting married. Now my first thought is, should we maybe call off tomorrow? We could save a ton of money right now on this baby. This seems a little silly to me. But we go do the rehearsal dinner, and then we go to the Janesville Country Club, and we have this like rehearsal dinner. So the next night, everybody's up early except my son and I, Mike, and we have to go get our tuxes at about maybe 11 o'clock, and the wedding's at 3. And I had got my fitting at on Pace Street at this tuxedo place. They measured me, and I realized I knew nothing about the tuxedo. If I would have walked in and they would have said, well, gee, can you tell me what color it is, what style it is? I had no idea. The only thing I got to pick out is my T-shirt, my underwear, and my socks. Now, I got to tell you, I felt like a real wimp until I told this story one time. And I told this story one time, and this guy comes up to me and looks at me and says, you got to pick out your own socks? I said, yep. Yep. So I get my tuxedo on. At 1 o'clock, we go to this wedding, and it's outdoors, and the gazebo's there. The wedding's at 3, and they do all these pictures before the wedding. And they got me done real quick. And they're doing pictures of the bridesmaids, the groomsmen, all these things out by the river, down by trees, up in the gazebo, and so on. And all of a sudden, this guy comes with this cage with a couple birds. Now, I'm always looking for something to do. And so I go up to my daughter, and I said, would you like me to ask him to leave? Because, this is a wedding. And she looks over, and she says, oh, good, the doves have arrived. Now, I think this is the stupidest thing I've ever heard. Why would anybody pay to have birds that look a lot like pigeons to me go over them? Then I'm wondering, maybe doves are normal at all these weddings. Maybe there's doves at all weddings. I've never looked at doves. Doves could be flying all the time at weddings. I've never paid attention. So I'm going to go find out when these doves fly, because to me, if I'm paying, they're working. So I go over to the fella, and I just say, when do you let these doves go? He says, well, when the minister says, now I give you Mr. and Mrs., I let them go, and they'll fly a couple times, and they come right back. Well, I got to tell you, I'm watching this thing. And sure enough, at the gazebo, when the minister finally said, now I give, by the way, that was a problem. The priest that married him inside then refused to marry him outside. We had to find a renegade priest to marry him on a Saturday. He's from Woodstock, Illinois, actually. That's where they did Groundhog Day, if you want to know a little history. And we had to throw in golf in the morning. Anyway, so finally the priest says, now I give you Mr. and Mrs. I never saw my daughter turn around. Never was watching. I was like a duck hunter in a blind, waiting for those doves to go over and go down. So let me bring you up to speed here. I'm in the front row of this gazebo. They got like 300 seats. They got a gazebo. They got doves in the back. I got a renegade priest up there. And I'm exhausted, just like some of you are probably exhausted right now listening to me. I'm exhausted. I'm ready for this thing to end. And all of a sudden, I hear an engine. Now, I'm deaf here. I hear out of here. And luckily, it was coming that way, because I always have to turn my head all the time. So I look, and there's guys in a boat. Anybody ever been to Wisconsin? No, you get a lot of guys in a boat. You know what else. Anyway, so they're coming down the river, and they're probably about the groom's age. And now they have some options. They could say, oh my gosh, a spiritual thing's going on there. Look at the gazebo. Look at the dress. There's a wedding. We don't want to interrupt this. Let's turn around. We can always come back. That's option 1. Option 2, let's slow the engine down, go to the other side of the river, and just slowly go by and troll by. That's option 2. Option 3 is the one they chose. Let's rev this baby up. Let's do some 360s in here. And they're doing, Now everybody's acting like this ain't going on. But they're doing it so you can sort of act like you're looking at the gazebo, but you can look at the boat. And I'm watching this thing, and it's unbelievable. And all of a sudden they stop. And a guy gets up and he decides now to be part of this wedding. He sees the groom, and he doesn't know, but he looks about his age. He goes, hey, it's not too late. We'll pick you up at the pier. And I'm thinking, it is too late. He got married last night. Now I'm sitting there. I got a gazebo. I got doves. I got a renegade priest. I got a daughter that got married last night, and I got guys in a boat spinning that thing. Now, I grew up in the 60s. I'm thinking, my gosh, I'm having a drug flashback at my daughter's wedding. I'm having a surreal experience here. And then all of a sudden, the priest steps down from the gazebo, and he looks out at the group, and he says, if you throw a pebble in a pond, how much water does it impact? And then he walks all the way back. And the whole time he's walking back, I'm thinking, this is out of control. What is he doing? Then I'm so afraid, I'm sitting right here. I'm terrified he's going to call on me. And I got to admit, I wasn't paying a lot of attention to him this whole time. I'm waiting for the dove signal is what I'm waiting for. And all of a sudden, I'm afraid he's going to look at me and say, well, Father of the bride, if you throw a pebble in a pond, how much water does it impact? I'm actually starting to think. I'm thinking, I should ask my wife. Did he say how big the rock was? Did he say anything about the depth of the pond? And then I look at her and said, that's probably not a good idea right now. So I'm sitting there terrified he's going to think of me, but I'm thinking, pebble, pond. And then he goes back up on the gazebo and says, if you throw a pebble in a pond, it impacts every bit of water in that pond. And see, I would have missed that. Sometimes I don't pause. Sometimes I jump to a conclusion. Herbert Spencer says the sure way to keep ourselves in darkness is contempt prior to investigation. It's sort of rush to a decision before we have all the facts. And then he explains why he said that. He said, this is a big wedding. Some of you might not think you've impacted this bride and groom, but if you're sitting here, you have or you can. You might be related to a groomsman, a flower girl, a bridesmaid, you might be friends of the parents. You are here because you've been a pebble in their pond of life, even if you don't think you've done it. Never underestimate the difference you make. Now, I spoke before then, but I never spoke about Mrs. James. I never spoke about Mr. Fry, and I never spoke about Coach King. But when he told that story, all of a sudden, they came top of mind. The pebbles in my life that's impacted my pond that don't even know it. You men in this room are pebbles in a pond of life. You impact people we don't know we impact. When we pick up a piece of paper, we show people that, you know what, you pick up paper even if you don't drop it. When you open that door for someone, you show that politeness rules. When you do like Pastor Taylor and somebody says something that's wrong, you correct them and somebody says, I'm glad they did that. Whether it's with your children, your friends, or people you don't even know. So my message as I close is values are really caught, not taught. A culture is what you do when no one's looking, but most of all, never underestimate the difference you make in people's lives. Thank you very much for allowing me to be here.